Guys, it's Kwana back again with another review. Hope you guys are doing awesome. All right, so I finally got a chance to watch 2024's Here. This is a film that was directed by Robert Zemeckis and it stars Tom Hanks and Robin Wright. And it is an adaptation of a graphic novel by the same name. The premise is pretty simple. It looks at one location in New England and it traces everything that has occurred in this one spot from the dawn of time and the age of dinosaurs to current present day 2024-ish post-COVID era. And it looks at the lives that have been spent here and the losses that have occurred in this one spot. And it's a story of what happens here in this one place. And the here becomes a character in its own right. But then we pull back and we actually zoom in on one particular family, the Young family, where Tom Hanks plays Richard Young and his wife, Margaret Young, played by Robin Wright. And we also have his parents, Al and Rose. Al is played by Paul Bettany. And it traces kind of their history more closely than all of the others. And really what brought them together, what sustained them, their loves, their losses, everything that has occurred here. This was a daring attempt by Robert Zemeckis to both tell this story that has existed in a graphic novel form and to bring it to life on the screen in a very new and innovative way. And he does a couple of things differently here than most filmmakers. For one, the film is done in one fixed location where the camera does not move and everything that we're seeing is just zoomed in on everything that has occurred in this one spot facing in one direction, most of it taking place within the Young family home in their living room, and then everything that has occurred in that one location. And we don't zoom out and see anything else in the larger framework until the very end of the film. Anything that we see on the opposite end has to be shown through like a mirror. So it's a very interesting way to tell kind of a limited POV. It's still kind of third person. We're not necessarily in the scene, but yet we are. It's a mixture of what I would say is a second person POV where we're in the work with the family. We're in their living room. We're in their home. We're right there with them. But then also we're zoomed out and we're seeing things that maybe they can't all see. So it's kind of still a third person POV, but kind of from a bird's eye view. The other thing that he's playing with here is some de-aging technology. They actually use all of the footage that they've gathered and they've had for Tom Hanks and Robin Wright over their decades of artistry and use it to de-age them for this role. And so we see them at 17 all the way through till they are old, in their 80s or 90s. It's a really remarkable thing. Now, I saw someone liken this to This Is Us, and I would agree, except for they are, of course, using a blend of CGI and makeup to tell this story. And listen, if you had an opportunity to see this film last year when it came out in theaters in November, then you may have taken away one perspective. Now, it's currently airing on Netflix. I watched it for the first time today, and I must say I am a little disheartened by the critics' reception to this movie. It has a 38 or 39% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, which just means that only 39% of the critics that did record a review for Rotten Tomatoes had more positives than negatives to say about the film. And that's a little disheartening. For some context, The Deliverance by Lee Daniels, which in my opinion wasn't particularly well made, and while it was maybe interesting attempt at horror, it definitely was a little heavy-handed and clunky, had a 34%. Now, of course, those are different critics perhaps. They're not all the same pool of critics, but I definitely think that the critics have this one wrong. I saw a lot of one-star ratings on Letterboxd and on IMDb, and I just think that when you're given a one-star rating, right, for a film, you are definitely saying that this film is gravely flawed and almost irredeemable. because there's so much more wrong with it than is what's right. And so I'm going to give you my perspective of the film with just a few light spoilers, because I do want you to watch the movie if you have never watched it before. But I want to tell you the things that people seem to have problems with, so that you can make a decision to go into this movie maybe with an honest attempt. Now, I'm trying to wrestle with the critics' ratings for this movie, because I think a lot of it is just disappointment and what they see as Robert Zemeckis' skill set. This is the man who directed Back to the Future, Forrest Gump, Castaway. But for all of his wins, people have been highly critical of some of his other work. Polar Express, Beowulf. Both films that, in my opinion, have actually kind of gained a cult-like following in the years since they were made. Certainly, you can't escape Polar Express at Christmas time now. And I remember everyone was completely floored with Uncanny Valley at how it looked and how the movie felt when they first saw it. And now it's certainly not the least surprising of animation tactics and animation films that you've seen. So I have suspected the same thing will happen with this, where over time, people will come back to this movie and have a slightly greater appreciation for what it is. The positives for me in this story is that I really do like the journey that we take with the young family. I think that we look at most films at needing to tell this very singular linear story that goes in one direction, that puts the protagonist up against some great and very like concrete antagonist, that there's a definitive one thing that they are battling with. And for most of us, what we are battling with is life. It's just time marching on and marching on without us. And maybe our ideals, our dreams, our desires not coming to fruition, trying to live life, raise a family, do all the things, feeling like you're missing out on things, lamenting getting older. All of those things are things that most of us have way more in common than a championship win, a boxing match, going up against a monster, fighting something evil. Like, most of us treat film as merely an escape. But I think that it can be a tool every once in a while to return back to what life is really about, which is just living. And I think what Zemeckis was doing here was trying to give us a portrait of life as it is for most of us, just centered on the things that we love and the losses we experience and the things that we have in common with each other. And I thought that that aspect of the film was really nice. Now, there were some things that I would have personally, if I was the filmmaker, I would have changed. Having a greater understanding of, for example, the feminine, and particularly like this day and age, like women experiencing life in this time period, I perhaps would have changed the ending slightly, just slightly, and the outcome of the end would have been slightly different. But again, it's not my film, so I cannot tell Robert Zemeckis to change the ending of his film. It's just what I would have done and what I would have liked to have seen. But I also didn't have a problem with the way that it ends, because I know women who share a similar experience to Robin Wright's character. And for most women, her outcome and what happens with her character is going to be more to their actual lived experience. Also, I think it kind of takes a kind of Hamilton type of approach, in that the film, in my opinion, ends up being more about her character than it does about Tom Hanks' character, but it's a little deceptive in how it does that. And that is just the realization that I had at the end of watching the film. Now, with regards to the vignettes, a lot of people online complained that they struggled with understanding what was happening in the movie because of the vignettes. We jump in time and we go to the age of the dinosaurs, and we go to the age of the Native Americans, who originally, the indigenous people on this land, and then we go to the colonial era, and then we go to the Victorian age or post-Victorian age, and then we go into post-World War II, and so on. And so with those jumps, if you struggle with understanding the uses of like flashbacks and flash forwards in cinema, then that would be something. If you are someone who needs a very linear storyline, this will be something that you will struggle with this film. I just know that that is probably a lot of people's issues, is that they really do struggle with the linear storyline. I don't struggle with the linear storyline. I absolutely understand what we were supposed to get from every one of those vignettes. And I like the way that we jumped in time so that the moments we saw certain things happening within the families were the same. It was mirroring what was happening with the Young family. I appreciated that. But I do know that a lot of people had an issue with that. Now, I like the quote unquote gimmick that critics are calling for choosing to stay in that one location, because this is an adaptation of a graphic novel. I felt that it had a graphic novel feel to it by just giving us that singular one look. It kind of felt like a panel. However, a lot of people have said and echoed the sentiment that this would have been better as a play. I don't think that they're wrong. I think that this would have been a great play, and I think that that's probably one way to adapt this project. But I also don't think that we should discourage filmmakers from taking chances on things that typically or seemingly would work better in one format or the other. I think literature is literature, and I think if you want to adapt a play into a film and a film into a play and a short story into a film and things of that nature, we've been playing with the interchangeability of these formats for a long time. And I think I don't understand why critics were so harsh on this, being that we have been begging for people to take chances and risk in filmmaking. And they're not always going to knock it out of the park, but they're also sometimes just solid. And I feel as though this was just a solid film. It was solid. I think solid 3. I gave it a 3.5 because I enjoyed it probably a little bit more than most people, but I'm also in that age of my life where I could relate to the characters in a particular way, so it resonated with me particularly a little bit more. But I could understand if it didn't resonate, that would be worthy of losing a point or two, right? A half of a star or a star. But to certainly people giving it 1 star, I just personally don't understand that. So those are some of the things that I think. Oh, the de-aging. I particularly did not care for the de-aging. I do think it was a mistake to not cast younger actors to play the young versions of Tom Hanks and Robin Wright, and simply use makeup and or CGI to make those young actors look more like Tom Hanks and more like Robin Wright. I definitely think like we have seen films where they are able to find characters that look very similar to the actors playing them. I have not seen It Ends With Us, but I do know that the young actress who is playing the young Lily Bloom character, the Blake Lively character, she looks remarkably like a young Blake Lively. I think that's very smart. I think that would have been more impactful to do that, but I understand Zemeckis wanting to play with the art form a little bit, and so I applaud his attempt. It's just that honestly, when they're supposed to be 17 on screen, I don't buy it, because I teach 17-year and 18-year-olds all day. They look old as all get out in that particular moment, but then when we see them later on in the film, I'm completely fine with them looking like themselves, because they do look like the de-aging software does nail the late 20s, 30s year old versions of them very well. So I thought that that was perfectly fine. All in all, I personally enjoyed here. I thought that it was a daring attempt on Zemeckis' part. Certainly not his best. I don't think anybody would be claiming that, but I don't think that it was a completely trash movie. And I think the audiences are also showing it has a 59% audience score. So I think audiences will enjoy this much more than the critics who are looking to tear it apart because it's a filmmaker who is no longer knocking it out of the park and doing things that are completely new and nailing them. But I also think we can't discourage filmmakers and creatives from taking chances and risk. I think if you liked Boyhood, you will likely like this movie as well. But let me know in the comments, have you watched here? Did you like it? Did you agree with the critics and think it was horrible? Or did you think they were being a little too harsh on it and that it was a solid film? For me, it was a solid film. I gave it a 3.5 on Letterboxd over here. You know, I like to grade on a curve. I'm going to give it a nice solid B, so I'm going to give it an 85. But let me know what you would score it at, and I will see you guys in the next video. Toodles.